Hello, parents, educators, and nerdy D&D fans. You have found our new home for Area of Effect, a talk show where we discuss how tabletop role-playing games benefit the whole family. We're currently in process of shifting all our old but golden episodes over to this new channel by posting a new episode every weekday until we catch back up to our new episodes. We would love your help getting this new channel up and running with a follow, share, or review. And thanks for joining us on our quest to bring more adventurers to the table.
The new Red Bull Dragonberry Energizer is now at McDonald's. Made with freeze-dried dragon fruit. And made to lock in. The all-new Energizer, now at McDonald's.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
A Kids Table Podcast.
It's a heavy time in the world, friends. There's so much that is wrong about what's happening, to kids especially, that it's really easy to become paralyzed. Which is, ironically, where a soft game like D&D might be able to shine. So what does Minnesota have to do with D&D? In today's episode, Allison and I talk through our own fears and worries, and where we believe playing D&D can help kids to become resilient, better able to engage in community action, and one day make the world better than we've been able to do.
Welcome to Area of Effect, a podcast by the Kids Table, where we discuss how tabletop RPGs benefit kids and answer your questions about playing TTRPGs with the kids at your own table. Let's start with who we have here today. Buckle up for a real treat because it's been a while. Today we have both of the faces behind the Kids Table. I'm Allison.
And I'm Ryan. I'm so glad to be back with you today, Allison. How's it going?
I'm so glad to do that too. Ryan's been busy working behind the scenes on numerous projects, but I'm really glad that we get to be together today to chat.
It's funny because we're acting like we haven't talked to each other in, months since we did the last AOE together, and like we talked an hour ago. So it's just I don't get to be on AOE that much, but I'm really glad to be here with you, friends, and to be with you too, Allison.
Woohoo! I'm so glad to chat with you today. Shall we get started with some tavern talk?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're going to have a friendly chat as we sit by the fire in our cozy fantasy world tavern, sipping something delicious from a warm, steaming mug. Ah, I really could use that today.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Ryan, the world is on fire. The news is not good.
No, it's a lot.
Parenting is always hard, but it's especially hard right now.
Yep. It's not fun. I have two elementary schoolers. A first grader and a fifth grader, and even they know what's going on. Like we live far away from Minnesota, and they both know exactly what's happening right now. And it's hard to figure out what to do. I don't know how you're doing, but it's hard over here.
It is really hard. My kids are a little younger, so as far as I know, they haven't heard like other kids talking about current events at school, but I have noticed like a heightened just general stress and like worry level. So I think they're sensing that from like the adults around them, right?
Sure.
Who are dealing with this.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. I mean, your attitude as a parent is always affected by 100 different things. And sometimes like your kids are lowest on that list. And I've definitely noticed lately I've been more tired. I've been more irritable. I find that I have a bit less patience for nonsense. And my kids haven't changed. Like they're not doing anything different than they were 6 months ago, a year ago. But I think that my outlook on the world right now is so heavy that is definitely translating into my parenting right now.
Oh, for sure. On Sunday, went, I paid attention to the news a little too much and I went on a little spiral,
Yep.
internal spiral. And it was a beautiful day. I live in Florida, guys. It was 82 degrees and the kids wanted to go to the pool. So I brought them to the pool and I was like, maybe what I need to do is I just need to float in the pool for a second. And first of all, I will acknowledge that this is a very privileged opportunity in my life that I get to consider floating in a pool to deal with the news because it's not threatening my family directly.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was a privilege and I knew that I was spinning out and I took them to the pool, but like my kids can tell, right? Like I'm snippy with them. They're like, play the pool game with us that you always play. And I'm like, I don't feel like it today. And they're like, why not? And I'm like, how blunt do I want to be with them about why mommy doesn't feel like playing right now?
Yep.
So yeah, they definitely notice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's okay too. Like, I'm not a fan of the parenting style where you pretend everything's hugs and puppies all the time because everything isn't all hugs and puppies, and kids know that. Um, and sometimes, the kid definition of a hard life and the reality's definition of a hard life are very different, but kids still know what it's like to know that things aren't okay. And I think that when adults are a little bit more vulnerable and are showing some of that, I think that that's good developmentally, and I think that that's it just helps kids understand that the world is bigger than themselves. And also, they some of the things that are happening in the world right now are so heavy, and you have to grapple with what that means for your kids. I mean, like, some kids don't have the luxury of not paying attention, right?
Yeah.
Some kids are embedded in this and have been embedded in this for years and years and years, right? And that so many things have come to a head lately makes it harder for the rest of us to look away, and makes it harder for us to figure out where our kids fit into that system. And some families have been dealing with this the entire time their kids have been alive. So that brings an added layer to this when you consider the fact that some parents are already figuring out, have already figured out, and this is history, right? How to help their kids deal with reality as it is and still be kids. So for those of us who are, in some ways sort of new to this, there's enormous privilege in this. And there's an acknowledgement there that we do have an obligation to figure out how to help our kids understand what other kids are going through, right? And I think that that's one of the first steps in figuring this all out, is putting it on a kid level. Kids know how to help other kids, and kids want to help other kids. And even when kids are egocentric and selfish, they can still understand like a helping hand, right? So when we're thinking about, where our kids fit into the bigger picture of what's going on, understanding how to connect their experiences to somebody else's experience feels like part of the solution to me.
I put it in context with like their friends or other people that they know that have different life experiences than they have, and I've always made a point of making sure that we're in community with people of a variety of life experiences and backgrounds.
Yeah.
And at my kids' age, a lot of it comes in the form of books also.
Yeah.
Reading books to open their minds to other experiences and perspectives and struggles in the world that don't impact them directly, but exist in friends, neighbors, or people that live far away, just so they're aware that it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that having a bookshelf of diverse perspectives is always a good idea. And especially in the times that we're in right now, it's key to helping kids navigate these moments that aren't all hugs and puppies, while still helping kids understand that they're safe, right? Or helping to build a world where kids are safe, right? I mean, a lot of kids aren't safe right now. And if yours are, then there's sort of that obligation to figure out how do you make the rest of the world safer for the rest of the kids, right?
Yeah.
And if your kids aren't, reading those diverse perspectives still helps you sort of helps your kids locate themselves within a wider context and a wider circle of people who are trying, and who are thinking and attempting to do the work that will hopefully make the world a better place one day.
And by instilling the values that are important to us in our kids and the motivation for action, like they can do something about that too. And it can be an extension of not only just what can we do as adults, but what do I want them to do about it when they see problems like this in their reality in the future?
Yeah.
Is there anything that's giving you hope or joy as a parent these days? A little glimmer of hope amidst the darkness?
Yeah, I mean, there are. I am a big fan of collective action, because kids need community and kids need to know that they are in community. And so I took my kids to a vigil for Alex Preddy back just this last Sunday. And we're so far away from everything that it was a very peaceful, very sort of meditative moment, which is fun for particularly my first grader, who is not a meditative guy. And honestly, and me too, I am also not a meditative guy. So like to be able to just sit with people in the hardness and, think through what it looks like to bring light back into the world was really nice. And also like on Monday, I was at a school board meeting and, where I am, the school board is having to go through significant budget reductions. And we had a group of parents and teachers there who were excited and passionate for finding other ways to help with the budget. I'll just say it like that. we had alternative proposals in mind, other than the district, right? And being in a group of like-minded people like that was so nice. Like just to know that I'm not alone in the values that I'm trying to instill in my kids and the structures that I am trying to place out in the world. I think that is bringing me joy. It, for whatever that means, like knowing that in this time where it is so easy to feel so alone and so scattered, that community is still out there and that you have a place and a purpose. And sometimes that purpose is just to be held. And sometimes that purpose is to hold. That is helping me. What about you?
Yeah, I think kind of along similar lines for me, community is definitely a big thing. I have this book club that's like somewhat new, only a few months old, of like-minded moms, and we do read a book every month, but we get together and our conversation goes in circles because we kind of talk about the book and then we talk about current events and what's feeling depressing to us, and then we talk about our kids and what's going on with them at school and how proud we are of them. And then we talk about our goals for this year and what new hobbies we want to try. And then we get back to the current events. Like we share all of that together. And it's really nice to know, whenever occasionally like a new person joins us, or like the phrase we always say is like, don't worry, she's a safe person. And that's like the code that's like, okay, we can really talk about everything here and we don't have to put up our guard that we're like certain subjects are off limits like you do if you don't really know somebody else's perspective, just because that's like our social boundaries, right?
Yeah.
But with this group, we can like let down those social boundaries and get stuff off our chest, and that's just been very cathartic to me to have like-minded moms in a similar place in life. And my kids are the youngest, well, the second youngest in the group, so I also enjoy hearing from the moms who have older kids to like see kind of what's coming next for me as a parent. which is great. And then I think just seeing how kind my kids are to like other friends and just hearing about like, oh,
Yeah.
so and so was sad on the playground and so I gave them a hug. You know, their version of going and doing an act of service.
Yeah.
Or going and helping somebody, especially if like even if it's an inconvenience to yourself or not fun for you.
Yeah.
Just kind of seeing those little moments where I'm like, oh, like you really are doing a great job as a friend, like bringing light into your school and your world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Now it's time to level up and dive a little deeper into our topic of the day, which is what does D&D have to do with Minnesota? That's a confusing question, right?
Yep. If you're listening to this podcast in the future, far in the future, that may be a very weird question to ask. But I think for those of us here situated in January 2026, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially those of our listeners who are located in the United States like us, although I know that this is a global news event. So this can feel like kind of a strange subject for a kid's or parenting D&D podcast. But Ryan and I both have a background in education and are versed in child development and helping kids through all sorts of struggles. And one of the reasons that we love D&D is because it can help players process what they're going through in real life. So that's kind of the angle that we're coming from. So how does D&D help kids grapple with difficult subjects?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I would say is just if you're looking for like-minded community, gathering around a table and playing a game is one of the ways to do that, right? Any difficult period of time has to be punctuated with times of levity. And so being able to gather kids around a table and not necessarily forget what's happening in the world, but just be present with each other around a table is incredibly helpful. So that's for kids who are experiencing this very directly and for kids who aren't, but are just sort of feeling the general malaise of the adults around them. Just being at a table together is one of those places where you learn what collective action looks like. And then over and beyond that, the ways that kids engage with each other and with the other adults at the table is where they start to learn those skills like empathy and communication and coordination and problem solving, right? I always go back to the three big rules that we have at the kids' table. And the first one is every time we sit down at the table, we tell the kids we treat everybody in the game and around the table with kindness and mercy and justice. We define kindness as treating the person across from you as a full person. Mercy, like acts of mercy, that person has needs and you might have the resources to be able to meet them. And justice is the idea that those needs come from some broken place in some broken system and you are obligated to fix that system. When you orient the game around, virtues like that, it helps the kids not only to just like play nicely together, but it also helps them start to understand how what they do in the game is preparing them for what is happening outside the game. These are things that they can take with them onto the playground, into the classroom, into the streets, and do, things that are just as meaningful as what's happening around the table.
I think it's interesting because a lot of people, especially younger people, don't approach the game thinking like, oh, this is really going to be an experience that's going to help me process internally what I've been experiencing due to that event that happened in my life, right? But rather, they kind of come to it maybe as a form of escapism, like most fantasy movies, books, video games, whatever. Like you usually do that as a form of escapism. But what you find out is it's kind of both. That it has these moments where it's very different from your reality, and so it's a way to be silly. It's a way to take risks that you wouldn't take in real life, perhaps, or just imagine what it would be like to live in a world with magic and creatures that don't exist in our real world, right? But then at the same time, the through line, the undercurrent of it, like with, this is also the reason why I love sci-fi books, is that they're actually telling you something true about the real world. You're
100%.
actually exploring something true,
100%.
um, yeah, about what's happening. And you're encountering those systems that you talked about when you define justice. You're encountering those systems, but in a different way, right? Like there's this evil king, and he's been ordering that, all the goblins have to work for him and bring him all their treasure, and they can't keep any treasure for their families. I don't know, something like that. And so, that's not something that's happening in our real world, but it's similar to things that happen in our real world.
Right.
So it helps you think through, like, okay, what would my character do in reaction to that? And because for kids, their character is themselves.
Right.
Like, what would I maybe do as a response? And maybe I would be afraid to go and talk to the king in real life, but my character can go talk to the king and then see how that goes. And then maybe that gives me the courage to speak up when I see something that's unjust in real life.
Yep. Yeah, for a lot of people, playing the game is a way of processing. There's this Latin phrase that I really love, solvitur ambulando, which means it is solved by walking. And I love that because the essence of it is that when you don't know what to do, go for a walk. And as you are walking and looking at the trees and talking with your neighbors and just sort of in that space, your brain in the background is chewing on the problem that you have. And if you walk far enough, you'll walk to a solution, is the idea. Solvitur ambulando is what you are doing in D&D. When you're sitting around the table and you are talking to goblins and the evil king and saving the hamster that somebody lost from the village, like, you're doing those things, but you're also thinking about what is actually going on in the world. And kids have the opportunity to make spontaneous connections. There's a developmental concept where kids sort of spontaneously create boxes in their heads for concepts to fit into. And those things are not spurred by any one moment, but when you are letting the brain sort of do something creative, do something even silly, it gives the brain space to create these other spaces inside of itself to categorize concepts, right? So, maybe you're saving a hamster in the game and your brain in the background is chewing on, how do I talk to this person at school who wasn't very kind to me, right? And you never know what kinds of connections kids are making between what's happening at the table and what's happening in real life.
This isn't true at all kid D&D tables, but I think when there is a parent or other trusted adult at the table, whether a DM or actually, especially I think when there's an adult that's another player,
Yeah.
the adult can model processing the injustice that they're encountering or the emotions or the trauma that they've experienced as that character, right? And then different like coping skills and being vulnerable with a friend or another player, asking for help. They can model all those good coping mechanisms that can equip kids, can put it in their toolbox for real life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and as the adult at the table, if you're the one behind the DM screen, you have the opportunity to shape the story, and there is an awesome and real power in that. And I think that you have to be careful because you could just make a campaign that mimics exactly what's happening in the real world. But I don't think that would be as powerful as just making whatever it is, whatever campaign you are doing, bringing out some of those other concepts, right? You don't necessarily need to have one-to-one analogs for kids to understand how these things fit together, right? Like, I would be really interested to read a one-shot somebody writes in this moment about helping kids learn the difference between lawful evil and lawful good, right? I love the concept of lawful evil just because you get to play with the idea that for some people the law protects and for other people the law binds, right? And that's the difference between lawful good and lawful evil. For lawful good characters, for lawful good systems, law protects. And for lawful evil systems, the law binds. And that's a very clear analog to what is happening in our world today, and would be really interesting to have kids chew on that in a fantasy setting. And right, like the government is evil, but it's doing the law. So how do we square those two things? And what is their responsibility in standing up to that? And how does that affect the baker down the street and the dragonborn who's begging outside the gate, right? Like, you can create these situations that aren't specific one-to-one analogs with what's happening in the world, but are still giving kids the tools to pick apart the things that are happening around them and to give them a language with which they can articulate what to do about it.
Yeah, and it introduces a difficult concept like, what if the law feels like the wrong thing to do, right? That's a hard thing to talk to kids about, but it introduces it in a softer way where it's not, directly impacting, like, this is a silly example, but just the other day I went to the grocery store with my kids. My 5-year-old climbed in the basket and my 7-year-old goes, "Oh no, mommy, on the flap thing in the baby seat, it says, do not put children in the basket." And she was like, so very firstborn, flustered that I allowed this to happen, but I was breaking the law, right?
Yeah.
Of like
The law
letting her
of
sit in the
cards.
basket. Yeah. So like that's already deeply ingrained in her. So like that would be great to introduce into our campaigns, like understanding that, there's the law, and then there's like what is good for people around us. Like,
Yeah.
she isn't a kid that's going to hurt herself in the basket. She isn't a kid that's going to hurt anybody else in the basket. Like, I know as a parent why that rule is there and that it's okay in this situation, right?
Yep.
So.
Yep. Okay, so now I have another campaign idea. The firstborn trying to figure out when the law is not good, and the secondborn trying to figure out when chaos is not good.
Yeah.
Right.
Every family with at least 2 kids needs
Every family dynamic ever created. But I think that that's a really good point too. My firstborn also struggles with the rules, right? There is the way to do it, and if you are not doing it this way, then he gets very flustered. And I think that some of that, like, what you would call classic secondborn syndrome of my secondborn son, is just him messing with his brother. Right? He knows actually what the right thing to do is, but because it needles my firstborn so much, he's just gonna push that button as much as he can, right? It's not that he doesn't care about the law; it's that he just likes messing with his brother, right? So I think that is an interesting way too, right? To talk about larger systems in the world and our responsibility to reform them or break them or make sure that they are treating people well. And also, like, that's the macro level. And then there's the micro level of how do I respond to rule and law? And what happens when things aren't fair the way that I think they should be fair? And is fair what I should actually be seeking in this moment, right? These are all things that kids are grappling with at the table, but because they're at the table, they're doing it in a space that feels safe. They're doing it in a structure that feels familiar. They're aided by their other friends at the table. They're aided by the dice, and sometimes the dice are able to help them make decisions that they wouldn't otherwise make. And by which I mean sometimes dice rolls go wrong, and you fail a dice roll, and the story goes a way that you were not expecting, and that forces you to have to grapple with what happens when things aren't the way that I think that they should be. And because it's all happening at the table like this, it's giving their brains a chance to chew on these difficult concepts so that when they go back out into the world and the world is hard and messy and dark, this isn't the first time that they've had to think in these ways. And so their brains already have these pathways that have been built at the table. And so it doesn't make it any less difficult for kids to encounter these difficult situations, but it does make them more resilient, and it does give them better ways to cope and get through it.
Exactly. I just think it's a brilliant game. Everybody should be playing.
I agree.
Stay tuned for more from Area of Effect.
Mystery Snacks by TTRPG Kids is a collection of bite-sized mysteries that will spice up your tabletop role-playing experience. These whodunits are designed for all ages to enjoy and written in the playful style of your favorite detectives like Scooby-Dooby-Doo and Tintin. Mysteries can be dropped into any tabletop RPG system you like, or use the optional included Rules Light system to run them as a standalone adventure. From a museum caper to chaos on a magical college campus, Mystery Snacks provides all the ingredients you need, like a delectable hook, dubious suspects, tantalizing clues, and, for the final course, a satisfying reveal. So, snag this snacky set and solve an appetizing enigma today. Mystery Snacks can be found on BackerKit.com as part of February's Zinetopia, or on TTRPGkids.com for those of you listening from the future. Let's get snacking! Are you looking for the perfect beginner adventure for your dragon-obsessed family? Well, let me recommend Wormlings, an all-ages tabletop role-playing game, as the adventure for you. In this vibrant and playful game setting, players take on the role of young dragons training at dragon school to strengthen their skills and level up their powers. Your brigade of young dragons will investigate mysteries, take part in hilarious hijinks, and help one another overcome struggles with the power of friendship. The 15 included adventures start off with a tutorial, which teaches the simplified 2d6 game system in a learn-as-you-play style that makes learning the rules a breeze for kids and parents alike. Even character creation is smooth sailing with 5 pre-made dragon characters and blank sheets for your own creations. When my kids, ages 5 and 7, played Wormlings with me, they loved taking on the role of baby dragons, trying out their powers and helping each other to succeed in every challenge they faced. They even took the play beyond the table and into their own art and imaginary play games. You can find Wormlings, an all-ages TTRPG, by Lone Colossus Games, and download a free sample at bit.ly/wormlingstkt. It's time to begin the tale of your very own Wormling Brigade. So, since most of our listeners are parents or other significant adults in a child's life, let's talk about kind of like bigger scope than just like you should get some dice and play D&D, but bigger picture. How can a parent or other invested adult help kids process things like current events, things like loss, grief, worries, hopelessness, all those struggles that a kid might encounter?
So the tendency that a lot of parents have, myself included, is to fix things for their kids. If a kid falls down, we pick them up. If they split their knee, we get a Band-Aid. If they're crying, we hug them. These are all very normal things for parents to do. And when the world doesn't have easy solutions, we still have a tendency to find those easy solutions for our kids, by which I mean we just don't talk about it. And I don't think that that serves a kid who knows what's happening. Just sweeping these hard situations and these big feelings under the rug doesn't treat a kid as if they are a full person. It breaks that kindness rule, right? They deserve to be listened to. They deserve to be held in these situations. So I think the very first thing that I would say is just listen. Your kids probably know more than you think. So you don't necessarily need to bring up hard topics, but you do need to be prepared to listen to what your kids are saying and what they're not saying about what they are noticing in the world. That is a really hard thing for a lot of us to do because we we're so conditioned by toddlerhood to answer questions, right? When you have your 3-year-old come up and say, like, what is this thing I'm holding? And you say, it's a plunger, put that down, that's gross, right? Or what is this thing in my mouth? That's dog food, spit it out, that's gross. Right? We are conditioned as parents when kids are toddlers to like put a bubble around them and answer their questions so that they will stop talking to us. Why is the sky blue? I don't know. Go ask your mom. Where does grass come from? It comes from the ground, right? They have conditioned us to respond in a certain way. And so I think when these more difficult things happen, our conditioning kicks in and says, we have to provide an answer. Our kid is waiting for an answer. We have to provide an answer, and we have to provide something safe. And that's especially developmentally as kids grow up past toddlerhood. That's not what they need. Sometimes they just need somebody to sit with them in the yuck and to say, yeah, this sucks, and I don't know what to do about it, but I do know that we can do it together, right? Don't try and answer questions you don't have answers to. The best thing that you can say to a kid sometimes is, I don't know. And we can find out together. And maybe there isn't an answer, but I'm still here, right? That to me is the power of a game like D&D, because you can do all of those things at the table and you learn how to do all of those things at the table. And those are things that you should be doing outside of the table too. Creating spaces where kids feel safe to ask hard questions and not just immediately feel stupid for not having the answer is a huge part of processing what is happening right now.
It's a hard thing in our busy modern lives where we have like pressure to be productive and busy all the time, right?
Yeah.
But I think one important thing to do as a parent is to find like built-in moments, ideally daily or at least a few times a week, when you have that reflective time and you can say like, what's on your mind? Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything you want to talk about today? You know, did anything happen at school that's bugging you? Or, you know, just give them time, whether like a lot of times this might be a bedtime, right? Because their mind is automatically kind of like going through their day, closing that chapter, thinking about the next day, what's coming up. So that's a great time if you have time at bedtime. Could be like driving in the car. It could be like if you're helping your kid practice, you know, throwing a baseball or shooting basketball hoops or something. And so like your body's busy, but your brain is still available to like connect to each other. Any of those kinds of moments, you know, take advantage of those and just show them that the door is open for them to ask those questions and that no questions are off the table or too uncomfortable to ask your parents, like questions that you know socially you shouldn't ask about at school or to like somebody like that. But like you can talk about that with me, even if it does kind of make me feel uncomfortable. Like as your parent, I want you to feel like you can ask me anything.
Yeah.
And we can talk about anything. And then I like what you said about just like being vulnerable about saying like, you know, the way I handled that was wrong. I shouldn't have let your sister climb in the basket, right? Or whatever. I feel no guilt about that, but
I was gonna say.
You know, especially like I think the impact of an adult saying like, I'm sorry that you know what I did there was wrong and I'm sorry for how that impacted you and I'll try to do better next time. Like, whoa, like that's really gonna wake your kid up if you say something like that. Or saying like, I'm sorry, like what's going on in the world right now has got me feeling helpless. It's got me feeling sad. It's got me feeling like I'm losing hope, you know, and depending on the age of your child, you know, sharing that with them so that they know that they're not alone when they're feeling that way, or sharing like your frustration and your anger and verbally telling them what you're doing to cope. Because I know like for myself, a lot of times when I'm feeling like really strong emotions, I'm an elder millennial, I've been conditioned to suppress it, right? So my kids don't actually see that process of me like feeling that anger rising and then like, oh, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. Oh, okay, I'm going to walk to the other room for a minute. Or like, oh, okay, I'm going to think about something else for a second so I can, kind of regulate my emotions. They're not seeing that because it's happening internally. But I think the more that you can verbally share that and be vulnerable about what you're thinking and feeling and struggling with and how you deal with it, the better for them to then follow in their life.
For sure, for sure. And I know that what you're not talking about is trauma dumping on your children too.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a really important distinction to make. You're not talking about, let me just make sure my kid is the place where I put all of my anger or all of my sadness, right? What you're saying is modeling processing matters because kids, and especially for those of us like me who are internal processors, my wife is an external processor, I'm an internal processor. So when I'm trying to figure out something that's going on, I just sort of like sit in a chair and disconnect from the world. Like it really does look like I'm just a robot that just like turned off for a minute. Whereas she'll like talk it out, right? And she'll need that. Your kid might be an internal processor, your kid might be an external processor. They might not know which one is better yet, but when you model those processes out loud, it helps them know which one they are and to see what a good process looks like versus trauma dumping on your children, which is, the world sucks and I don't know why everything is bad, right? Like that is not helpful to a kid. You as an adult do have a fiduciary responsibility to the kids in your care to make sure not that they are insulated from hard times, but that you are a safe space. So if you need to find another adult to trauma dump on, please do that because your kids cannot handle that. That is not the function of D&D. That is not something that a kid can handle. You should find, I'm always a fan of counseling. I am always a fan of paying somebody to talk to about your problems. That is a super helpful thing. Find a friend, find somebody else that you can trauma dump on because sometimes that is incredibly helpful and something that you need as an adult. Your kids are not that space. Modeling, processing, and trauma dumping are two different things, and definitely figure out which you're doing in the moment, for sure.
And now it's time to strap on our boots of haste and get ready for a lightning round. This time we're not going to be rolling the dice. We're just going to be answering some questions, some of them that we came up with and some that were submitted to us online. So let's go. Question number 1 is how to help kids not be violent and walk away from negative people. This was submitted by Kaylee R. Middleton on Instagram. Thanks for that question, Kaylee.
It's a good question too, because I will say for my sons, one of the harder things about playing D&D is the tendency to think, oh, it's battle time for every problem. My kids have gotten very adept at hitting each other with sticks. And, that's fantasy play, that's LARPing, that's fine for some situations, but, you can't punch your way out of every problem. The bigger question there, I think, is what do you do when somebody is harming you, right? We have a tendency sometimes in these situations to try and build a world where kids aren't being harmed. And that world does not exist for some children. And all kids need to know what the parameters of that world look like so that if they are being harmed in a specific way at school by another adult, that they have a space, that you are that space where they can go to and say, this is happening, and that you're not going to dismiss it. You're not going to say, oh, just avoid that situation, but that you're going to take it seriously and make that situation stop, right? It's not enough to just not be violent. It's got to be proactive in a way where kids understand that things that are happening to them shouldn't be happening to them, right? If you take that down a level, I think one of the things that Kaylee is asking there too is coping practices, right? This goes back to the trauma dumping point. Like, just walking away from negative people. If somebody is constantly negative towards you, how do you, figure out what that looks like and find a better way to be? I think that happens at the table too, right? And that is a modeling that we as adults can be doing with kids at the table. If you're failing a dice roll constantly, you've been playing for an hour and a half and not once have you rolled a success, and you are starting to spiral, our kid is starting to spiral in that moment. I'm no good at this. I'll always lose, blah, 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 right? This is a space where you as the adult can step in and be like, no, we play the game because it's fun. And when it stops being fun, we stop playing the game. That's the third rule at the kids' table. And stepping out of that space is always an option, right? There are so many things about the situation in our world right now that we can't step away from. And especially depending on where you are and who you are, you don't have the luxury of stepping away from certain situations. And we should be doing what we can to help kids find safe spaces away from the negativity that they can go to, even if it's just for a little bit of time, even if it's just while they're sitting at the table with you. We have to be creating those spaces where they can walk away from.
All right. Question number 2. Should kids ever lose a battle?
I think it depends on the kid. I think that losing in D&D is soft loss, right? Like, you're not losing anything major. And for some kids, even that loss is really difficult. My first grader is in a phase right now where he's playing Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and every time he mistimes a jump and dies, it is the worst thing in the world. You would think that he had cut off a limb, the way that he is crying. And it doesn't matter how many times I sit there and gently parent him and say, the last time you failed this battle 7 times, and then on the 8th time you won. So what does that tell us? It tells me I'm no good, right? Like, sometimes kids just aren't good with that. And I think it's the job of the adults at the table to figure out, is this a learning moment or is this a stress moment? And if it's a stress moment, then why would you make them more stressed out? Again, Rule 3 is we play the game because it's fun. And when it stops being fun, we stop playing the game. There's a tendency in certain circles in D&D to make it as realistic as possible, right? And this is almost always an adult modality, which is totally fine, right? Consenting adults at the table can play the game however they want to play. But reality means something different to a kid. And if they are having a hard time processing, rolling a natural 1, this might not be the time for them to lose a battle, because it might just tip them over the edge in that day, and then they will stop having fun. That being said, structuring a game so that a child always wins is not helpful developmentally. D&D is a good space where kids can encounter that soft loss moment, right? Where they can roll a dice badly, where they can lose a battle, they can make a wrong decision, and there are no real world consequences to it, right? These are places where kids learn what it means to lose, so that in the world, when they actually lose something, when they suffer a personal loss, when they suffer a loss of trust, that they have built those pathways in the brain around loss and become more resilient and know how to cope with it. There are lots of kids right now experiencing a loss of trust, a loss of freedom around everything that is happening. And those kids don't have the privilege of sitting at a table and, pretending to lose a battle, right? So we also have an obligation to help our kids navigate these bigger losses and these bigger traumas using the tools that we have at the table. I don't think it's an easy question to answer, should kids ever lose a battle, because I think it is context dependent. I think it depends on the kid. I think it depends on the situation that they are going through. And that is why it is helpful to have multiple adults at the table so that you can, as a group together, figure out what is happening at the table, right? Some kids at the table might be ready for the loss. Some kids at the table might not be ready for the loss. And if you have multiple adults there, then you can sometimes think of multiple solutions too. That is, I think, what I would say.
I do think that they should lose battles. I love the aspect of dice being chaotic and representing things that just happen in life sometimes that are out of your control, and how to deal with things that are out of your control. But I will say with a caveat, I do think they should lose, but I think they should lose with an opportunity for another way out, right? Like a friend can give you a healing potion, or maybe you do lose that battle to that monster, but then you wake up and you can fight again the next day, or maybe you have a chance to run away, or like whatever. Because I think that that just teaches them to think outside the box. At the same time, when they are very emotional, I've been learning about my kiddo who has ADHD that, I'm always wanting to be like, I see that you're feeling anger right now. Let's talk about why you're angry, and let's talk about what we could have done differently so we didn't get this far. That does not work, right? I've been learning that what we need to do first is emotionally regulate, and then later, from a calm place, we can reflect on what went wrong and what we could do differently next time, which is not my first instinct because my brain wants to fix it for her immediately, right? And give her the tool to fix it herself, and that just doesn't work.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that is something that you have to know about the kids who are at your table. Sometimes loss is going to dysregulate them. So if you know that the loss is going to dysregulate them, you got to have that structure in place beforehand to help them re-regulate before you can really move forward. And so again, that's where we play the game before because it's fun rule is super helpful because it helps orient everybody at the table towards fun rather than fair. Because the dice don't play fair and the world doesn't play fair. And kids have this innate sense of fair, which is beautiful and lovely. And I wish that was the way the world worked mostly. But sometimes fair doesn't work in a bad way too, right? And so helping them to regulate first and then deal with that loss is brilliant.
Yeah, I have a great kids book that helps talk to kids about that, like the difference between fair being equal and fair being equitable. So maybe I'll put that in the show notes.
I like that.
All right, time for our last question. Should we shelter kids from the news and from current events?
I think again it depends on the kid and it depends on the context. I think that some kids can handle it and some kids can't. And I know that some kids don't have that luxury. And so for those of us that do have that luxury, we have to confront that and understand what that means. If you are sheltering your kids from the news, I get it. And what are you still doing to prepare them for the world that they will one day enter? Because the things that are happening in the world are the product of years and decades and centuries of thought. And those thoughts will not be gone by the time our kids, are adults. So they need to have the tools to grapple with what is happening around them. Maybe they're too young right now. Maybe you think that they're too young right now, and that's valid. And the world will still be hard in some very specific ways once they're old enough. So maybe this isn't the time. But I would encourage you to really grapple with what it means if you are able to successfully shelter your kids. I would also say that D&D, having kids at the D&D table is one of those places where you can explore what it looks like to not shelter kids. Kids can handle so much more than we give them credit for. Kids can also be affected by so many more things than we give them credit for too, right? I think of the movies that I grew up with in the 80s, like Neverending Story.
Oh
And
gosh.
right? And how traumatic that movie was.
Uh-huh.
And how
Oh my
like,
gosh, I can't, I still have the picture of the horse.
oh yeah.
I just need to push it from my mind. It still is traumatic for me to think about it,
For
right?
sure, I know, right?
Yeah.
And kids' movies today are not in that modality. Like, no movie
Yeah.
that my children have watched in the last, the older son is 10, in the last 10 years, matches the level of gravitas of the Neverending Story, right?
Yeah.
Like, even though my older son would say that Luca approaches that, my son cannot get through
Oh,
Luca. Yes, the Pixar movie.
really?
Yes, because
What about that?
he runs away from home. Like,
Oh, the firstborn breaking the
yes,
rule. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
This goes back to the first one breaking the rule, right? The fact that Luca runs away from home, we cannot get past that scene to the rest of the movie, and he's 10. Right. So, like,
Oh,
again, this is knowing your children, right? Would I show that son the Neverending Story? I don't know. But I do know that kids can handle more than we give them credit for. So if you are choosing to shelter your kids from this news, I would encourage you to use a game like D&D to explore those same concepts in a safe space, right? What does it look like when the law is not being used to protect, but in fact to bind? What do you do when people around you are being disappeared? What do you do when the people that you thought were here to help are here to harm? Those are concepts that you can explore at the D&D table in a safe way. And those are concepts that some kids are experiencing in very real ways right now. So if you choose to shelter, and I understand the instinct, I would just encourage you to find other ways to explore those concepts so that when your kids encounter them in the real world, and eventually they will, they have those pathways built up to be resilient.
yeah, that's brilliant. As we're signing off, I just want to announce or remind you that our season 3 of our original actual play campaign with Kids at the Table premieres February 18th. Yeah, we're very excited to get back to the main campaign. So please share that information with other people who might have a good time listening or watching the show. Anything else you want to plug, Ryan?
The world is dark and full of terrors, and the only way we get through this is community. And so I know it sounds so silly and trite, but find us on Instagram. Like,
Yep.
we're on Instagram. We respond to questions. If you are having questions about what's going on in the world and how you talked about them with your kids and what D&D has to do with them, ping us. We will answer those questions. We might even make like a little story out of them. But the only way through this is together. So find your community. I know that that's not the plug that you wanted me to say, but that's all I got, man.
No, that's better than I could have imagined. And if you're not on Instagram, you can email us at questions@thekidstablednd.com.
For sure.
Well, thanks for chatting today, Ryan. It's been lovely to have an area of effect together once again.
It is good to be in community with you, Allison. Last thing I will say is, I don't know that we've ever explained this, but the name of the podcast is Area of Effect. And we named it that because you have an area of effect around you as a parent, and it's your responsibility to manage that area. So, you can be Thunderwave and fling people away, or you can be Heal and figure out what you can uplift around you. So, manage your area of effect and be safe, friends.
Thanks for listening to Area of Effect. Check out our original actual play D&D show with Kids at the Table on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Be a part of the ongoing conversation by emailing questions@thekidstablednd.com. Find resources to bring adventure to your own table at thekidstablednd.com/shop, and join our quest to introduce more kids to D&D at patreon.com/thekidstablednd. Because when kids are at the table, everyone wins.